Oh, sorry, cake. Oh, leave it over here.
Can I squeeze through?
Yeah, go for it.
Here he comes. Happy
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Peter. Happy birthday to you.
Take 5 when that was a rehearsal.
Right, let's do it again.
We had a party going down.
Oh dear.
Are we ready? 1,
2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Peter. Happy birthday to you. He's a jolly good fellow, and so say all of us.
do you want to say something?
Goodbye.
Is this a time for saying something?
What do you think? Yes?
Yes. Come on, Peter.
Stop me if I go on too long.
Okay, so we've got a timer.
Don't worry,
Got people around, all around, in the round.
Right.
Yeah, go there.
80th birthdays fill me with ideas about biography, and so I used that model. I was born in Burnley, which is a town 20 miles north of Manchester, to an immigrant doctor from Sri Lanka, then called Ceylon, and a photographer's assistant from Edinburgh, my father and mother. By the time I was born, my brother, then 5, had already built a wooden cabinet for our mother's shoes. So I had no hope in do-it-yourself. 2 years later, my sister was born. 2 years later than that, we were sent to be fostered with our grandmother in a village on the coast. It was a violent time and place. We saw the RAF biplane flying over the sands quite close to the water and near the hotel, turning round, going up the estuary, round a curve in the estuary where there was a slight mound. It disappeared and there was a shoot of a flame going at least 3 times as high as any of these houses, followed by a bang. And there was the night of the incendiaries when we all got into our grandmother's bed, and some neighbours too, and it was as if the trees in the garden of the landlord were all on fire, but they weren't. And things went on a bit further. I started a lot of walking in my sleep and having terrors at night, and was put on phenobarbital continuously. Our brother came and joined us, and then there was the revolt. One night he stood between our grandmother and our sister and said, "I hate you, you bitch." And it was an amazing shock to hear such things said directly to an older person and by my brother. Of course, a lot tumbled out of that evening. He was whisked to the boarding school section of the school, which I then became a day boy at, before I too became a boarder. And fairly soon, the whole place folded. The owner died, leaving his top hat for Murray to pursue his interest in conjuring. And I went to the boarding school section of the school, and my sister went home for a short time until a boarding school placement was found for her, from which she ran away. She ran away in the middle of the night. She said that the indoctrination of suffocation was so terrifying that as soon as she could wriggle out of their embraces, she found a latch on a curtain, on a window, scrambled out, scrambled down the drain pipe and ran into the woods to Elsie's cottage. Elsie was one of the good people in our lives then. And she went home for a bit, and then she went to another boarding school. And from that boarding school, she and I got mumps at exactly the same time. So there was a quarantine problem for the two institutions. Our mother drove from Burnley to visit each and collected me from one and her from the other, and we went home for our convalescence from mumps to stay with our parents, who the following day went away on holiday. No, there's more to come.
That wasn't the finale.
No,
As somebody in the audience said, no wonder Peter became a psychiatrist.
she, when after the incubation period or immunization period, we went back to school, and she discovered that the only way that she could get any approval from any of her peer group was by being naughty. And she deliberately was naughty with all sorts of things like breaking windows, taking the boat out in the night on the little lake, and so on, until she was expelled and got at last what obviously she needed, which was to live with her parents.
And then
Again.
she married a vicar.
And then she married a I went on being a very good, quiet boy and left at 17 to go to Edinburgh University to study medicine, where again I was quiet. I found it terribly hard and didn't know how I would pass the exams because I found it much more difficult than others. And Julian has left now, hasn't he? Julian and I met in that first year. And I left that, finished that, and for my first jobs, leaving 200-mile away university, I went 200-mile away for my first job in the southerly direction to Kent. No, not to Kent, to Essex. And I did that job, and I did another job, and then I worked in the East End. I got into an obstetrics hospital. I went into a children's hospital, the building of which still remains on Hackney Road. And I began to get interested in psychiatry and met a psychiatrist who visited the hospital from time to time and went through the BMJ ads with me, looking at hospitals which he reckoned would be okay. And he pointed out Wallingham Park Hospital near Croydon. So I went there, and it was a good mental hospital of those days. It had its doors mostly open, it was innovative in its practice, it had occupational therapists, and it used legally and prescribed and seriously monitored LSD. And I was impressed at how useful LSD appeared to be and how there were no adverse consequences. When other psychiatrists, junior psychiatrists, had been to have psychoanalysis or have psychotherapy, I decided to do the same and chose a psychotherapist who worked with LSD. Again, very carefully monitored and supervised with good protocols. And amazing things happened. Immediately, I started to dream in colour. I started to be able to think in 3 dimensions, which I'd not managed to do before. How anatomy would have been so much easier. And then all sorts of things changed in my life, that I found that the people that were around me did not appear nearly as threatening as they had done before. I managed to have conversations without making obscure remarks or jokes, and very soon I was able to stop taking all the sleeping pills and so on, which I had started as a medical student because the Royal Infirmary Edinburgh was serviced by a few pharmacists who did a business out of selling drugs to us medical students. And around that time, my fear that I would never find anybody who would ever put up with me had gone, I was able to behave differently. Joan had gone to that hospital for her reasons. She was a student of Eva. Is Eva still here? Maybe not.
Maybe upstairs.
Maybe
I think.
upstairs.
Yeah.
And we got married.
Hooray!
And that
We
was
hope, Charles. Yeah.
very nearly 50 years ago.
Still some time to go. Still testing. Yeah.
On
50 years this year.
Yeah.
Yay!
I'm sure you know the joke about the elderly Jewish couple who went to their rabbi and said, "We want to get divorced." And he said, "Why have you waited till you're 90? And they said, "We wanted to wait until our children were dead."
Yes, that's good. My psychiatric businesses started in one direction and went on, and my family was just the amazing experience of making a family and having 3 daughters who did this party. But a bit of the in-betweens professionally was that I did have a few challenges because I got a job as a consultant working with in an adolescent unit, and the regional hospital board wanted to move me out because I refused to fill the beds. I was interested in keeping people in the community and working with them not to need to come into hospital, and they were not. And all sorts of other bits about family therapy and newer forms of therapy came in. And I had some troubles still. I had, in the psychoanalytic training which I did, I worked out a lot of things in my life that needed some more resolving. I had a couple or 3 other breakdowns of one sort or another, needing, first of all, help from Joan and two acute crises, and otherwise other bits of therapy. And the last time was when I was preparing to retire and was finding the most terrible tensions, made me tell Joan that I thought I might walk out, and I told a few other people that I thought I might walk out. But I went into therapy again, and difficult at my age, just about 60, to find one. And he sent me a card, but he couldn't come to the wedding, but he comes from an organisation called Brief, which got me through, and
You
it
mean
was
your
very
party?
helpful.
Or...
And
Yeah.
and thank you for pause. I want to say how much I appreciate my family and my neighbours and friends who do things like letting me out of the house when I'm locked in it, or letting me into the house when I'm locked out, to lend to the usual things. And the old friends and colleagues whom I've met or kept in touch with, or sometimes have just come, and that's been wonderful. I wrote a lot. I'm proud of writing a few things. I'm proud to have written with John Byng Hall and Tom Aitken, who's now dead, the first paper in the British Journal of Psychiatry which mentioned the words family therapy. I'm proud to have written the first paper about family therapy when one member is on the deathbed in the Journal of Family Therapy, and to have written quite a lot about decision making in family therapy or in work with adolescents, and of writing with Sandy Bourne papers about the distribution of extra money to psychiatrists and women and other doctors, but especially to women, because we discovered that the committees that throughout the country that made the decisions about which women consultants should have extra money were something like 92% male. And we published that in the British Medical Journal. We thought they were very supportive. But I've made 3 decisions, I reckon. One was I refused to do my military service, which was an interesting time and not a terrible, terrible disaster for me, but I did challenge the state on that. I decided to marry Joan, is my second decision with repercussions, consequences, which alluded to.
All these people.
And I have decided, well, nobody goes to, or very few people must go to a birthday party of an 80-year-old without wondering about death, or people still being alive, etc., etc. And I'm so pleased that yesterday, the day between my birthday and this party, the House of Lords took a great step.
Yes.
Thank you. Not sabotaging or cancelling or shouting out down a proposal of legalising assisted dying. My power of attorney is done, and my attorney is here. My advance directive is signed, and the witness of my signature is in the street, and it's been discussed with my wife and my children, and I hope to stay here till that time. Meanwhile, to continue to enjoy some things, and thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.